Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So you practiced that complete example. Yeah. So we designed a complete to-do application with JSON server for data. So all CRUD operations we implemented in this: reading, inserting, updating, deleting. And we used the concept of routing also into it. We implemented routing and we designed one example. So you have to practice this well, because majority of practical interviews when you go on React.js, they give such tasks. Now you need to do some modifications in it. Some additions I will tell you, you have to add them. Rest of all design I showed you how to create the design. I will give you some concepts that you need to add into that. So I will show you. Already we designed the complete interaction. Now what you have to do in this, I will give an point. In this to-do application, every time you have to start the server also. So JSON server must be running in the background. JSON server and your application server both should be running. Your React server. So in this example, what you have to try, let's see. So this is the example here. In this example, what additional things you need to try, I will show you. We created a register and login. We designed register and login. What we need to do is, for register and login, yep. So for register and login, I will give you some task. You try to do that. So what are the tasks for to do application? So tasks for to do application, what you have to do is, first set up validation for register and login. You have to do that. These two things, this you need to implement. Validation means, so what is that validation? In this register form, you need a validation. What is the validation is? all fields are required, and password must have at least one uppercase letter, number, and a special character. That is the validation you need to do. And email must be in proper email format. This validation also you have to set up. That means in the register form, you need to set up validation. What you will use for that? You have to use Formic with YUP. Use YUP library for validation. So you need to set up validation for that. Next, design UI for login and register. Login and register with Material UI. You have to design the UI for login and register with Material UI. Material UI means you use Material UI components, text box, buttons. So you use them and design. Not only that, you have to set up validation for add appointment. You have to set validation for add appointment, and appointment date must use MUI date picker. For appointment date, you try MUI date picker. In MUI, you have a date picker, you have to try that. So by using MUI date picker, so that means here also design UI for appointment also same. Okay. Design user dashboard with MUI. With MUI, you design the dashboard. MUI cards, MUI alerts, you try designing by using that option. So whatever validations, forms, user interface you have learned, you have to implement that. So this is task for you. You try that. So whatever example we designed using the combination of Bootstrap, this you have to try with MUI. And after user login, adding appointment, deleting appointment, edit appointment, all you have to design with MUI. If you can do one simple app like that with MUI, you can easily manage everywhere. Try. If any difficulty is there, let me know so that I will explain how to solve that if any issue is there. But these are all the basic concepts you need to implement in that application. Right? I hope you practiced, everyone. Yeah. So JSON server and CRUD operations with combination of routing. Right? Now in the next level, we will learn one more app, a little larger one with real-time backend database and real-time server-side API. We will do that. But now after understanding this, you try all these. These are all the tasks for you. You have to try that. And after knowing this, you will learn some more techniques when we are learning some more concept, like how to use JWT tokens for authorization, authentication. While working with the backend database and API, I will show you how do we use that, because these are very commonly asked for React people, React developer. And in another application, we will implement Redux also. In this application, we are not implementing any Redux. We will implement Redux. Redux is for state management. Application state we need to maintain using Redux. We will implement that. Right? Next, after doing this, now today we need to understand another. All these days, we worked with function components. That means in React.js, application is built by using components. All are component based. And the components are designed by using function. But React can design components using class also. In the modern React, they don't recommend to use class, but already so many applications in old versions, even today, some projects when you work in React, they may be using classes. So we should have an awareness on how to use classes for components. Till now we used functions for components. Now we need to learn about classes. So you need to learn about React class components. You need to understand about React class components. What are the changes here? What is different from function? You need to know. Actually, to learn and understand class components, first you should have a awareness on JavaScript classes. When you learn JavaScript, you learn JavaScript OOP concept, object-oriented programming. In JavaScript object-oriented programming, you learned about classes, class members, how they work. I am not teaching them again here. I am not teaching them again here the class components and everything. Means JavaScript classes I am not teaching because those concepts you already learn in general JavaScript only. So I will just show you how to implement them and what is difference. Actually, JavaScript related, JavaScript class concepts. What are the topics you need to be aware of in order to work with React class components? What are class concepts? So you need to know about class declaration and expression. You need to know about the class members. What are class members? What are the class members we have? I already told you like level by level, everything we will discuss, right? So all concepts we are going to implement in one more project will be there in that we will implement. So don't get excited. Huh? Some people are still very excited about callback is not discussed. Don't worry, I will not leave you without them. Huh? Still we haven't finished React.js now, right? So by the time we finish React.js, you will have everything. You will learn everything. Where, which concept to learn, we will discuss clearly. Online people are very excited about 1-2 hooks. Every hook I am dealing with according to the situation. When we are implementing in project in different areas, we are learning about them. So you keep your excitement with you online people who are looking for some other hooks, all you will learn. Okay. Yeah. So here, how do we deal with these class members? What are class members you learned in JavaScript classes? Usually, what are the members in a class? Generally, every class in JavaScript have property and have an accessor and have a method and have a constructor, right? You learned about these in JavaScript. These are class related concepts. Usually JavaScript people have to know all these. And I hope already you people know all these in JavaScript. So I will not waste time again discussing this here because these are basics of JavaScript. What is class? How do you configure the class? What are the members of class? These are all JavaScript things. Class members, we have properties, we have accessors, we have method and constructor. And class have static and non-static members. And class have private members. Actually, from ES6, the private members are defined by using hash. Hash is used, hash for private. You know, ES6 and higher versions, JavaScript classes have private members defined with an hash. In older versions, we used to do that by using what? In older version, we have a weak map. By using weak map, we create and configure private members. And you already know JavaScript don't have any access modifiers, public, private, protected like access modifiers, but it have static, non-static members, and it have private members defined using hash. So these are modern ES6 and higher version related concepts. And you learnt about class inheritance and you learnt about class polymorphism. These are the class related concepts in JavaScript. I am giving the topics list because you all learn these concepts in JavaScript already. So here we have to learn how to use them. How do we work with them? JavaScript teaches you all this. What is a class? How do we use these class members, properties, methods, accessors, constructor? You learnt about rules of constructor. You learnt about rules of inheritance. You learnt about static, non-static members. You learnt about the private members in ES6. And you learnt about the inheritance and polymorphism. Because JavaScript is not an OOP language, but it supports some concepts of OOP. When it supports some concept of OOP, in that limited inheritance and polymorphism is allowed. It will not support complete polymorphism. There is no dynamic polymorphism, and it will support inheritance. Constructor also, you know the rules. What are the basic rules of constructor you already learned. So in JavaScript, these are the class components, class related topics. Now when you are coming to learn React, in order to use class components, you should know all these concepts. Already in JavaScript, people learn about them. What is drawback issue with classes? So one of the point is what is issue with the OOP, object oriented programming? What is the issue with object oriented programming? Actually, in real time software development, we have different types of programming systems. We use different programming systems. What are those? In real time project development, we use different programming systems like, so we have like POPS, OBPS, and OOP. process-oriented programming system, object-based programming system, object-oriented programming system. And what are the drawbacks and issues with OOPS? You know, process-oriented, object-based, object-oriented different programming systems are there. One of the main problem with OOP is, what is the drawbacks of OOPS? The main drawbacks of OOPS here is object-oriented programming. It will not support low-level features. It cannot interact with the hardware services. It cannot directly interact with hardware services. It cannot directly interact with hardware services. So it uses more memory. It uses more memory. It is tedious. Tedious means very heavy, very slow. In English, tedious means heavy, slow, lazy. These are the meanings of the word tedious. So it is very heavy, it is very slow, it is not fast in interactions, it uses more memory. These are the major problems of OOP. So object-oriented programming languages are not great every time. They have a lot of drawbacks. So we don't use them everywhere. What is fast is process-oriented programming systems are fast. They can work on less memory. They are very fast. They can interact with hardware directly. But OOP has these drawbacks. That is the reason we don't recommend OOP everywhere. Earlier, OOP is good for reusability, extensibility, maintain and testabilities, but it is not great in certain places. That is the reason even React community officially says that better don't use classes, use functions. Earlier, why they were using classes? Because earlier classes have more concepts when compared to functions. That means earlier we are unable to use state in a function, but now we can use state in a function. We have separate hooks designed. So earlier it is not easy to extend functions, but now it is easy to extend the functions also. That is the reason earlier they were using classes, but later now they don't recommend classes. They say that better use functions. For example, you see the official here, React pure components. Yeah. You see the official website. This is the official website of React. That means these are the official React people. This is official React people. And what is the current version? 19. That is the official React website. And you see here, see the official website, official people what say? We recommend defining components as functions instead of classes. That is the official recommendation. That means React people say that instead of classes, we recommend to use functions. Right? Actually, classes are still supported by React. We support classes, but we don't recommend them in new code. That means we don't recommend them to use in the new generation of React. So even today, several companies and generally React people who learned React few years back, they all work with only classes. And if you ask them why you are using classes, they have a lot of complaints on functions. Now, React developed functions in such a way that they can handle everything what a class can handle. That is the reason now functions are more lightweight and faster than compared to class. So now in modern React, we don't use them. But you should learn about them and you should know about them because you may have to work with them in a project. Because companies still use old versions. They don't immediately upgrade to the new version. You learn new versions, but you have to still work in old versions. There you will come across with these components, then you have to know how to handle them. So this is the official recommendation of React people, and let's see how to use them, how we can work with them. So class is a concept of object-oriented programming now. So if I use class, the problem is it doesn't support low-level features. It cannot interact with hardware services. It uses more memory. It is very tedious. What is the meaning of tedious? So you know the meaning of tedious. This is tedious. That means tedious means it is tiresome, length or dullness. It is described as boring. That means slow, very lazy. It's not very effective. But if you are looking for more features, then you will use this. Otherwise, it is very complicated, very complex, very slow actually. That is the reason we don't prefer OOP everywhere. We don't prefer OOP everywhere. Actually, you know, when you are working with your devices, for example, do you know you have operating system now? You know floppy disk. You know floppy disk. Before CDs, hard disks, we have floppy disk. Do you know capacity of floppy disk? How much capacity floppy disk is? Do you know? Floppy disk capacity 1.44 MB. Fixed, that is 1.44 MB is floppy disk fixed capacity. Fixed it is. 1.44 MB. In this MB, in that floppy disk, we used to have an operating system. We used to have softwares. We used to have our files also. In 1 MB floppy disk, we used to have an operating system. We used to have softwares like word processing, spreadsheet, softwares we used to have. And we used to have our files also. We used to carry our files also. Now 1 MB means even one photo will not come. Right? Now Windows, it requires minimum 2 GB, 4 GB, 8 GB to install. But Windows is very attractive, graphical. So it is handled with graphics, mouse. If you are looking for attractiveness, then you need to compromise with space. You need to compromise with speed. You need to compromise with interactions. But if you are not looking for that, you can easily manage with less memory. So that is the main idea of React, to avoid classes so that they can make it fast. Once they started avoiding classes, React claims that they are 10 times faster than previous. That means React official community claims that React is 10 times faster because of functions when they stopped using classes. That means they are more better when they are working with functions, not with the classes. Okay, let's see how to use them. Means how to create them, how to work with them, we'll see. You already learned all these topics now. In JavaScript, you learned all this. How to declare a class, how do we use inheritance, what are inheritance rules, everything you learned. What are properties, methods, everything. Just we have to use them here. Let's see how. How to create a class component. So creating class component. How do we create class component? We need to know. So how to create class component? What are the basic rules? First point, you can configure class using declaration or expression. You can configure class using declaration or expression. And next point, class name must start with uppercase letter. This rule is already there in our function also now. Class name must start with an uppercase letter. Now, a component class must inherit React.component or React.pureComponent base class. A component class must inherit React.component or React.pureComponent base class. It will get the behavior, component behavior it will get by using React component. A component class must inherit React component or React pure component. So that means, for example, syntactically, how to design a class, we use the keyword what? Class. Of course, you need export. What is it? Class. Class name. Class name is suppose some login. And how it becomes a component? It should extends. You know, inheritance in JavaScript, how JavaScript class can inherit another class by using which keyword? Extends. Extends React.component, that is the base class. Or it can extend React.pureComponent, any one. It should extend any one of these classes. Now, what is pure component and component? So this is a very important question in interviews. What is pure component? In interviews already I told you, they ask what is higher order component. You remember now? What is higher order component? Already you learnt in JavaScript higher order functions. What is higher order component? I already explained that with example also. Higher order component means a component that takes a component as a parameter and returns a component. A function that takes function as argument and returns a function. Then it is called as what? Higher order function. A component takes a component as parameter and returns a component. Then it is called as higher order. Already I given with example also when we learnt about controlled components. Higher order components, pure components. Actually, what is impure and pure component? Pure component technique is nothing but pure component mounts, pure component mounts only when there are changes in content. It mounts only when there are changes in content. So impure component mounts every time, even when there are no changes in content. Even when there are no changes in content. So pure component is just like it is asynchronous. That means we don't want to load every time. We want to load only when change occurred. Then pure component. Even if change is not there, it will load every time. Whenever you request, it loads every time. That means what is the point? So this is cached into the memory. And whenever you request, if there is any change in the content, then only it will load your component again. You are requesting again and again, but there is no change in the data. There is no change in the content. Then this pure component will not load again and again. It will load only when there are changes. What about impure component? It will load every time. You request it, it will load again. Even there are no changes in it, it will load again. But you are requesting a component 5 times and there are no changes, and every time it is mounting, then it is time waste. If there are changes, then only mount and update those changes. So pure component is better. But many times we design components in such a way that so we want it to mount again and again because it has to get the data updated from server every time. Then we use which component? React.component. So a class can extend, have to extend. It must extend component or pure component, right? Next, after understanding this, now you learned one more rule in JavaScript. What is JavaScript inheritance rule? What is JavaScript inheritance rule? JavaScript inheritance rule is a derived class must call superclass constructor. That is the basic rule of JavaScript inheritance. You'll learn that, otherwise inheritance will fail. In JavaScript you learned. In JavaScript, what is the inheritance rule? If a superclass have a constructor, the derived class constructor must call the superclass constructor. Otherwise, inheritance will fail. Every class have a constructor. And when you are inheriting any class, the derived class must call the constructor of superclass. That is the basic rule of JavaScript constructors. And you learned that in JavaScript classes. If you don't implement, the inheritance will fail. Because you have to inherit the superclass here. What is the superclass here? React component is the superclass and you have inheriting it. Derived class is which one? Login. So derived class constructor must call super constructor. That is compulsory. Otherwise inheritance will fail. That is a general thing in inheritance actually. Suppose I will show you here just example like, suppose I am showing you an example here. Your JavaScript I am showing, this is superclass. Superclass have a constructor and console log, this is super constructor. And we have a class derived. Derived class extends which one? Superclass. And it is having a constructor. And this is console log. This is derived constructor. And we created an object for derived class. When you create an object for derived class, what is the OOP rule? Object-oriented programming rule is a superclass constructor is called first, then followed by derived class constructor. You learned that rule now? OOP languages. What is the OOP languages rule? A derived class constructor must call a superclass constructor. Actually, in your C++, Java, C#, everywhere, it implicitly happens. Internally, they call them. But in JavaScript, it will not happen. So you have to manually implement that. That means you see now, when I run this, inheritance will fail. You see when I inspect, so the inheritance is failed. What is that inheritance you see? It says that must call super constructor in which class? Derived class. That is the basic rule of inheritance. And if you don't follow the rule, it will fail. How to class the super constructor in derived? By using super keyword. Am I right? Then it will call the super constructor. Inheritance will work. Inheritance is going to work. Yeah. Inheritance is going to work and show. The super constructor is called, then the derived. That is the basic inheritance rule. If you don't follow this rule, inheritance will fail. And here also you have to follow. So what you have to do? So the component class is a derived class. The component class is a derived class. Hence, it must call the super constructor. The component class is a derived class. Hence, it must call super constructor. That is compulsory. That means syntactically, export class login extends react.component. Anyone is enough. And in this class, we have a constructor. And what this constructor have to do? It have to call the super constructor. This is the first one. This is you need to define. It is mandatory. If you don't do that, it will fail. Inheritance will fail. It is mandatory in JavaScript. So here also, when you are creating a component, you have to follow this rule. Okay, next. According to the rule of component, we learned component rules. Tell me what a component have to do. There is another rule for component, huh? What a component have to do, tell me. We learned component rules, right? Every component, what it has to do. Every component must return a JSX element. Compulsory, na? Every component cannot be void type. It cannot be void type. What it should return? Every component must return JSX element. How class will return? How class will return? Only functions will return. That means how, according to the rule of component, every component must return JSX. compulsory. Every component must return JSX. Then how a class can return? Class cannot return. Then what it does is actually next important point. So a component must return JSX element. React class component returns JSX element by using render method. It have a render method. By using render method, it will return JSX element. And we already learnt every component must return only one fragment. Na? It should return only one fragment, right? We have to use only one fragment. So a component must return JSX element, and the React class component returns JSX element by using render method. So finally how it looks like is export class login extends react.component. It have a constructor. It will call the super constructor. And it will have a render method. Render is a method. This render method will return. What it will return? It will return, this is JSX. The render method will return JSX. So directly a class cannot return anything. It must return by using this. So that is the basic rule. So make sure that component is returning some JSX. And here actually it returns JSX using render method. Render. So let's see how to create the class component. So what we are doing is just close all this, and I will create a new folder, class components. Okay. In this, I will create a simple component file. Component file is same, JSX file. I will add a component file as suppose admin login.jsx, something. So here, how we design this time, we have to export class. Class is admin login. So it extends react dot what component. And in this you need a constructor, and make sure that the constructor is calling the super constructor. It needs a render method. This render method have to return the markup, the fragment it should return. And this is which one? Admin login. That's how we are designing. Rest of your JSX rules are same. Style binding, class binding, all are same. Event binding, some difference is there. I will tell you. Here, everything is configured like this. Now, this is the technique that we used to use while working with React. Actually, 3-4 years back when people learned React, it was starting itself classes only. We don't use functions much. So directly we start with classes. Entire React finish with class. Functions we tell at the end, simply saying that functions also can be used, but they have so many issues. But now it is reverse. We are learning all through functions only classes just we are learning to understand how they used to do in old version. Because complete React application is recommended to build with functions only now. Now here it's okay, it's fine. I will run this setup in the startup and which component it is? Admin login. Admin login is the component. Now you can see the admin login component is working in the startup. It's same. There is no difference. So here we are using class this time. I will use some class container fluid. Okay, then you can see some tab. This is all these classes and everything are same. This is just the class component. Now, what are the rules? What are additional things you need to know? That means I created a simple class component here and it has some content. Let me copy this. This is an example of class component. Admin login dot what JSX. It's a simple class component. Now in this class component, what you need to know is here, you need to know state in class component. State in class component. How you managed state in function components. You have used use state, use context, use reducer, like that you have used. So one important is class will not support hooks. Class will not support hooks. We don't have all these hooks earlier. That means use state, use context, use memo, use callback. We don't have all these hooks. And in many projects, we don't use them also. Because many old projects are still using classes and they cannot use hooks. They have alternative techniques. They cannot use hooks. Use state, use effects, use memo, use reference, use callback. These will never work in classes. That means actually React don't have them at all earlier. They started from React 17, 18 version. We started using these hooks. Class will not support hooks. If in interview anybody asked you why, that is your common knowledge in JavaScript. In JavaScript, you learned that in JavaScript class has member. You learn, na? Can we have a function in a class? You can have. You can have a function in class, but function cannot be a class member. Function cannot be a class member, but function can be in class. Function cannot be class member. That is basic of JavaScript class point. So why hooks are not allowed? Because classes will not allow functions as class members. Why classes will not allow function as class member? Because functions are immutable and class member must be mutable. Even variables also not allowed inside class members. So variables are not allowed as class members. Functions are not allowed as class members. So hooks you cannot use in classes. There is no chance. So that means general you learnt about the rules of classes. Huh? What is the rule of class? Suppose I am writing some class demo. In this class, I am writing a function f1. Functions are not allowed. Why function is not allowed? It says that a class can have only constructor or a method or an accessor or a property. Function, can we have function in class? Yes, we can have function in class, but it cannot be class member. We can have function in class means what? Suppose I have a print method. In that method, I can have function, no problem. So the question is important to understand. If interviewer asks like, can we have a function in class? Answer is yes. Can we have function as class member? No. Class member means it's a direct member of class. You cannot have. But function can be inside class. You cannot have a variable as class member, but you can have a variable in class. You should keep them as members of methods. Then they are possible. So technically functions are not allowed in classes. That is the reason. Hooks are all functions only now. Hooks are all functions only. So you cannot use hooks. So class will not support hooks. So what is the point here is class is stateful. Class is stateful. Generally we call it as stateful. What does stateful means? It have a state implicitly. It have a state implicitly. Internally it have a state. You don't need to design a state. You have to just use it. It have a state implicitly. You have to just use it. That means class is stateful. That is the reason we generally used to call class components as stateful components. Stateful components means they already have a state internally. Inbuilt state is present. We have to just use it. How? Let's see. Suppose here I will remove the heading. Okay. Then it is empty. Nothing is there. I want to define state. How do you define state is inside the constructor you can access this by using this. This refers to current context, right? This dot state. We have this dot state. And this dot state inbuilt. State is inbuilt. You don't need any hook, and hook will not work also. So you have a state inbuilt. In every class, state is present. You have to just access it. And state is an object type. Object type means it can have keys and values. For example, key is title and value is string. Suppose I am using admin login, something like this. And after that comma, I am having some categories. Categories is an array. Array of all, array of electronics, like this. Fashion, something like this we are having. You can have any kind of data. That means now state is only one object. In that object, you can have several keys. All the data is kept inside it. That means any kind of data you can keep in the state. Now how to access it? I want to access and use here. How to access and use here? Data binding is same. Data binding means in a binding expression, what we have to do? Access the state. How to access the state? This dot state. This dot state is an object. In that state object, you have a title. You access it. The title is available there. And you can see there is another option. What is it? You must call super constructor in derived class. That is the basic rule. Already I called now. But I am configuring the state after this. Means super constructor is called after this. That means what is the rule? It should be at the top, am I right? First you have to call the super constructor, then the derived will work. The rule you have to follow perfectly. If you miss that, that means before calling the super constructor, you can't do anything related to this class. That means now we are accessing it and using it. Now let's print the categories. Suppose I want to print the categories in a drop down. What to do? Same. Binding is same, no change. This dot what? State. In state what you have? Categories. Categories is an array, so map. Read every category. For every category you create an option and every option needs a key. Am I right? And here we need to print the category. We need to print the category. Everything is same. Everything is same. It works as usual. That means all these concepts work as usual. Only the point is here there is no use state. There is no use state. You cannot use it. Use state, use effect, use related, any hook you cannot use it. So in React we don't have hooks earlier. Everything have to be maintained internally like this. How to maintain use effects and all I will tell you one by one we will see. The first thing, state. How do you configure the state? So you can configure state. You can configure state inside constructor using this keyword. And important, state is an object type with key and value reference. So syntactically, we have constructor of derived class. In that we have a super. Here we have to use this dot state is equal to, and we have a key and value. So state comprises of keys that can handle any type of value. That can handle any type of value. Any type of value means it can be primitive, non-primitive, any type of value. So here data binding is same as in function component. There is no change about data binding. That means anywhere you want to display this dot state dot what key. So you need to access the key. Right. So This is configuring the data. Now here we are having a state with some data, and always it is important to configure state inside constructor only. If anyone asks like why we have to write inside constructor only, because state must be initialized at the time of creating an component object. What is the job of constructor? Constructor is used for instantiation. Constructor is used for instantiation, means it is responsible for creating an object for class. So if a constructor is used for creating an object for class, at the time of creating object only, you have to initialize the state. After that, you cannot. State cannot be configured after the object is created. While creating object only, the state must be defined. That's the reason it is mandatory to define inside constructor. That is compulsory. So this is the state and you are configuring the state. Now the question is, how do you set a new value into the state? State can be initialized and you can define new value. So we understood the state concept. Let me put an example here. Admin login.jsx. Just roughly I given that name. You can use any name because already in our project we have so many. So in this, what is the example? State is having one title and state is having one categories. Title is what type? It is an string, and categories is what type? Array. It can be any type, array of objects, array, string, number, primitive type or non-primitive. How to access and use it? That is the same thing. There is no change in that. How do we access and use? That is the same concept. Okay, that is the point of state. So here we don't have use state. We need to configure by using what? State. This dot state. Next important is component. Next important component mount. Next important is component mount. Means if you want to define any action at the time of loading, if you want to define any action at the time of loading a component, then you don't have use effect here because use effect is again a hook. You can't use it. So how to write mount phase? Actually, class component have component did mount method. So class component have component did mount method. So it can define actions to perform at the time of mounting component. You cannot use effect, hook. So we have to manage by using component did mount. So you can define unmount actions by using the method component will unmount. There is a method called component will unmount. You can use these two methods. Component did mount and component will unmount. Here also component life cycle is there. I will explain in a simple point how the component life cycle works. First, we should know that here we cannot use any use effect. Instead of use effect, we have to just use component did mode. So let's see here. Suppose this state have a title. The title is initialized as empty. That means title is empty, nothing is there. It's empty. We want to configure the state. That means how do we add the state? Here, so what we do, we need to write one method. What is that method? Component did mount. We have to write component did mount. Component did mount is same as use effect. And at the time of mounting, what you want to set state. Actually, in our function component, we used a getter and setter. Here also we have a setter. We have to define this dot set state. We have a set state method inbuilt available. Actually, in Hook, we create our own getters and setters. Here they are inbuilt available. So set state, okay. What is the key? Key is what? Title. Into the title, what you want. So suppose admin login is the state we want to set. That means it will set that. Initially it is empty. It doesn't have anything. At the time of mounting, we set some value into that. At the time of mounting, we need to set some value and we set some value into that. Here we don't have any use effect. We have to define everything using component did mode. Component did mode. So here another point is you can set a new value into state while mounting or on any event by using set state. By using set state. Component did mount. So this dot set state key and new value, whatever value you want, you can set into that. So working with class components is little different. So the approach, the hooks that we use here. So you should never use the word hook in class components. We don't have any hooks in class components. All are called as what? Methods. Here we have a constructor and a method. All are methods only. So this is the mount, how you define. Actually, all your data accessing work same. Means what? API configurations, everything works same, right? For example, you see, suppose I want to fetch the data from any API. I will clean up this now. I need to fetch the data from any API and I want to use it. I will delete all this, okay. How to fetch the data from API and show here. We need to fetch data from any API and we need to display that here. Then how do we access and display here? Simple. To fetch the data, we have which method? Axios. You have fetch, Axios. We can use any. See, I'm expecting some details like I am expecting one is products. Products I am expecting as an array of objects. I am expecting products. So in the state, we need to configure products. Okay. Next, I am expecting categories. Categories is also an array. Okay, fine. Now at the time of mounting, we have to fetch the data and load the data. So here I will create two different methods. Remember, you cannot use a function. We have to use only method. Load categories. It is a method. How to write the methods you know already. So we are configuring load categories, and this should use what? Axios.get. Which one? https://fakestore.api.com/what? products/what? Categories. Then on success, get the response. And where to set this response? This dot set state. Into the state, we have a property called what? Categories. Into the categories, we have to set response dot what? Data. We have to assign this. Into the categories. Set state is having categories now. Into the categories, because it is an array, this data will be stored inside that. Okay, now this load categories should execute at the mount. In the mount, we will call load categories. And you know in a class how to call the methods. How do we class the members in a class? By using this dot member name, right? Okay. Now if it is a static member, you use the class name. Non-static member, you use this, right? Now the categories I need to display. I will put a heading categories. How to load all the categories? In a drop down I want to load. Then what we will do here? This dot what? State dot what? Categories. We have to map. We have to read every category. For every category, we have to create an option. We'll have a key category and we'll have a value also as what? Category. And you can see all the categories must be loaded here. It is getting from the fake store. Means all your concept is same. Only the point, no more function. Just you have to define everything as what? Method. And you have to call the method here. Now I want to load all the products. Same. What we need to do? Load products. And it should use Axios. Axios.get https://fakestoreapi.com/what? Products. Then we have to get the response, and we need to this dot set state have an products. Into that we have to pass response dot what? Data. Now all the products data, this dot load products. It will load the products also. Means at the time of mounting, we are calling two functions, load categories and load products. And all the products I want to display here, I will put a div margin top deflex. Like this I am giving. And here I want to display all the products. This dot state dot what? Products dot map, read every product. And for every product, you put a image. Image source we will keep, it will get from where it will get? Product dot what? Image. So width is 100 and the height also 100. We are just giving all the images. And you know every image needs a key na? Key contains product dot what? ID. Product ID is used as image. It will get all the products. I will use a flex wrap also so that it will come into the next line if there are many. This is accessing the data and using it. All concept is same. Just replace your functions now with methods. Replace your hooks with predefined state here. Use state nothing. You have to just define using this dot state, this dot set state. So this is a simple example to make you understand how it works. Means what is the difference? It looks completely different. Class component look completely different. All these days you have work. So that is the reason in many projects now, they don't care about your knowledge on hooks because they are not using them. You say, I know, use callback, use reference. They say that we don't need them. We don't need them because we can't use them. Our project doesn't need your hooks knowledge. That means you need to able to manage without those hooks. Means we need to learn these all techniques to understand. Now here, data binding, style binding, class binding, all are same. Only one special different is event binding. Event binding is different here. Event binding in class component is different. It has some changes. Those changes we need to learn. So actually, how events you used in functions, event points towards a function, but here we cannot have a function. Then here event should point towards a method. It should point towards a method. And there are certain rules to learn about this. That means some basic rules are there for event handling in class, right? That we'll see in next session. Tomorrow we will do that. First, you can try all these related to the class components. How to design a class component, how to configure the state, and how do we access the data from any API. And if you can do this, then we will see event binding. Some more differences are there, we will learn. Then we can easily design an example with both function as well as class. That we'll see in tomorrow's session, how to work with more options in the class. Okay, tomorrow we'll continue. But remember, this is old version. In the modern, we are not using classes, we are using functions. But you should know them, so we have to give a complete clarity on that. So tomorrow we'll continue. Okay, right.